on Jerusalem Dateline. This week on Jerusalem Dateline, Iran deploys one of the world's most sophisticated air defense systems to protect a sensitive nuclear site. And a top ISIS leader is killed in an airstrike. Plus, see the desert bloom and an ancient plant come to life. Could this be used in a third temple? And the miracle of Aliyah, the return of the Jewish people to the land of promise, continues. All this and more this week on Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. We're coming to you this week from the Ramparts Walk on the walls of the Old City, where you have views of both the Old and the New City. It's also the first show of our 6th season, so thanks for joining us throughout the years. We'll have more from Israel, but first, it's a major scandal in Britain, Muslim rape gangs. You may not have heard much about it because it's been covered up by the media and the government, but it's a shocking story. Dale Hurd brings us this incredible story from London.
Some scandals are so massive that they're simply hard to believe. But this one is true. As many as 1 million white English children may have been the victims of Muslim rape gangs, better known as grooming gangs, in towns up and down Great Britain. Policy analyst George Igler.
I mean, when you counter an issue that is just so unbelievable, just so outside your frame of reference and understanding, the immediate human reaction is just not want to believe it at all.
Perhaps even harder to believe is that while there have been prosecutions, British authorities have still not stopped this criminal activity. There's a particular problem involving Pakistani heritage men who target young, vulnerable white English girls. Not my words, but a member of Parliament, Jack Straw, who also said these Pakistani heritage men view white English girls as, quote, easy meat. This is when some shout racism, but here are the facts. Calculations based on convictions show that a British Muslim male is 170 times more likely to be part of a sex grooming gang than a non-Muslim. And there are no recorded instances of non-Muslims doing this to Muslim girls as part of a criminal enterprise. In one local jurisdiction, it was estimated that 6 out of 7 Muslim males either knew about or were part of a grooming gang.
What you do not have is any example of non-Muslim men targeting Muslim girls for this organized form of abuse. So the argument that this crime exists everywhere is not only false, but is being deliberately cultivated by the media and by the government inquiry that is kicking the can down the road.
The grooming gangs have been traced back as far as the late 1980s. At-risk white English girls, often from broken homes and some as young as 9 years old, were wooed or groomed by teenage Muslim boys called Romeos, and even by groups of Muslim men who hung around school gates. The plan was to make the girl feel important. She was given gifts and drugs, but she was being groomed to be a drug-addicted prostitute. Then came the gang rapes. The girls were threatened with death if they tried to flee.
It's not just sexual abuse. It is unspeakable levels of violence, victims being raped with knives, victims being raped with bottles, victims having their tongue nailed to tables. These are sometimes girls who are being picked up from children's homes on a Friday, are being raped during the course of the weekend by hundreds of men, and then returned with bleeding groins back to the children's homes on a Monday morning, and they don't do anything about it at all.
Christine's goddaughter was preyed on by the grooming gangs and is helping girls through the group Women Against Grooming.
They pulled up by the side of her in cars. They tried to get her in the car. They were talking to her, come on, come with us, we'll take you here, we'll take you there.
Were you saying that the authorities make it sound like it's the English girl's fault?
Yeah, or the parents' fault. It's your fault because you haven't got control of your child.
If you are a young English girl, particularly between the ages of 9 and 14, and you find yourself subject to the perversions of Muslim men, you effectively exist in a country where the forces of law and order don't exist at all.
Stephen Lennon, also known as Tommy Robinson, former leader of the English Defence League, was just a young boy in the town of Luton when he learned a family member had been victimized by a grooming gang.
My cousin was raped and she was found naked, running from the Muslim community, aged 13. The police wouldn't help. All the police would say is she's a drug addict. She was a drug addict because they got her hooked on drugs after grooming and raping her.
Some say grooming gangs originate from a particular region of Pakistan, but others point out that the Quran encourages Muslims to take enemy women as sex slaves, and that Muhammad had sex with a 9-year-old wife. ISIS defends sexual slavery as Islamic, saying enslaving the families of the infidels and taking their women as concubines is a firmly established aspect of the Sharia, or Islamic law. The reason these crimes were covered up and continue to this day is political correctness. No one wanted to be called a racist. The definitive book on this scandal is Easy Meat by Peter McLaughlin, who declined an on-camera interview for safety reasons. He told us journalists would not speak about it because the perpetrators were mostly dark-skinned and Muslim. Childcare professionals used political correctness as an omerta, a code of silence concerning what the public was allowed to know.
These girls are the victims of a multicultural revolution, and it's certainly an indication of the fact that this accusation of racism is potentially the most powerful political weapon known to man. This is also an example of what can happen in a country of 60 million where the press just refuse to report, where the cries of all these agencies fail to merely discuss what's going on, and it's only going to get worse for this reason.
The cover-up was eventually exposed, yet the grooming gangs continue to operate. One victim told a British newspaper, "Nothing has changed, not in the slightest. It's still the same scale as before."
They get sexual kicks out of ruining the most precious possession that those people have, their daughters.
Stephen Lennon warned that there will be repercussions.
But there will be a lot of blood spilled in this country, and it'll be on the hands of our leaders. And there'll come a time when they'll realise what they've done. And the country's people will realise what they've done as well. They've sold us out. They've destroyed our nation. They've destroyed our culture.
Dale Hurd, CBN News, London.
Back here in the Middle East, according to an investigation by the Associated Press, ISIS buried thousands of bodies in at least 72 mass graves across Iraq and Syria. The majority of the victims are Yazidis. 17 of the 72 graves have been located. The known number of victims is anywhere from 5,000 to more than 15,000. Activists believe there are hundreds of other mass graves to be found, but they say they can only be explored when the fighting stops. CBN reported on these mass graves in March. Chuck Holton reported that there were more mass graves in Sinjar than there are families living there. ISIS spokesman and chief strategist Abu Muhammad al-Adnani was killed while overseeing operations in northern Syria. That admission comes from ISIS. This is a significant blow to the terrorist group that has already lost senior commanders and founders this year. Al-Adnani laid out the blueprint for the ISIS attacks in Orlando and Paris. In 2014, Adnani officially declared the establishment of the caliphate and called on all Muslims to kill non-Muslims. So far, the group has lost its strongholds in Fallujah and Ramadi and is on the retreat in Iraq and Syria. From one Mideast enemy to another, Iran has deployed a Russian missile defense system at its underground Fordo nuclear facility. State TV showed trucks arriving at the location, with missile launchers being aimed toward the sky. But Iran didn't say if the S-300 system is fully operational. Russia began delivering the system to Iran earlier this year under a contract signed in 2007. The delivery has been held up by international sanctions over Iran's nuclear program. Those sanctions have now been lifted. Critics say it's more proof that Iran plans to build nuclear weapons, even though Iran denies it. Coming up, see the desert bloom and an ancient plan revive in Israel, perhaps for the first time in 1,500 years, when we come back. The Bible speaks of the balm of Gilead. It was a real plant in the ancient Holy Land, used in medicine and cosmetics, and even for worship in the Jewish temple. Now a modern-day Israeli farmer is reviving that biblical agriculture along with frankincense and myrrh. But as Julie Stahl reports, he's also getting some opposition.
Meet Guy Ehrlich, visionary, farmer, and possible provider of plants needed for incense for a future third temple.
We are at the Balm of Gilead farm. This is the nursery. The vision was to make agriculture of the Balm of Gilead and then to make an industry out of it.
Ehrlich is still in the early stages, but already he's helping turn the desert green on a tract of land near the Dead Sea and Jericho.
Along the years, I built a collection of rare biblical and medical and perfume plants, and I understood that there are some more very interesting plants in my collection that have a huge potential to benefit humanity.
It started with the balsamone tree, better known as the balm of Gilead. For 1,000 years, ancient Hebrew farmers at the Dead Sea were the only ones in the world known to cultivate this exotic plant, using it for medicinal and cosmetic purposes. Now Ehrlich's biotech venture is reviving that trade and more.
He knew how to make out of it one of the most important medication of the ancient world, a perfume that was considered to be the best perfume in the Roman Empire. It serves as the fifth ingredient of the incense of the Holy Temple, and since the Second Temple period, it serves as the anointing oil of the kings of Israel. At the 6th century, it disappeared from here together with the Jewish people.
Ehrlich got his first plant from a shoot that was smuggled by a German scientist out of Saudi Arabia and brought to Israel. Oddly enough, the plants he grows are thriving in the intense heat and salty soil on the shores of the Dead Sea.
I believe that in the future it would become a medicine. Before it would be a medicine, it will be a nutraceutical and a cosmetic. Before or after it might serve as the first ingredient of the incense of the temple.
Ehrlich has 6 acres of balm of Gilead trees so far and another 5,000 plants ready to be planted.
Right now I'm the only and the biggest balm of Gilead farmer in the world.
The resin from the bark, the berries, and the leaves of the balm of Gilead can all be used, and each has a different fragrance and properties. Ehrlich also grows frankincense on his plantation.
This is my second baby after the Balm of Gilead. I started with the vision of bringing back the Balm of Gilead to the shores of the Dead Sea, but after a few years I understood that I have some other very interesting plants in my collection, and nowadays I have a team of plants that I want to make into products.
There are more than 20 varieties of frankincense, but this is the one from the Bible, and it's considered an endangered species.
This is the frankincense of the Holy Temple. Now, there is no agriculture for this tree. This tree only grows wild in different countries at the Horn of Africa, and since there is such a big demand for this, there is overusing of the plant.
Ehrlich is also growing myrrh, and there may be a connection to the gifts the Magi brought Jesus at his birth.
Another way to introduce myself is as a Magi. We know the 3 Magi that brought Miriam presents. They gave her frankincense and myrrh and gold. Now there is a claim that the gold is the balm of Gilead because it was more precious than gold. This is the diamond of the incense. This is the diamond of the medical plants.
Ehrlich, who describes himself as a man of faith but not religious, is also growing a number of other plants needed to make the incense for the temple. That has caught the attention of some religious Jews who would like to see a third temple built in Jerusalem.
I definitely didn't thought that I'm going to serve the temple, and I was surprised from the amount of temple fans that came to visit me. When Rabbi Ariel was here, I told him that I'll be more than happy to supply the incense for the temple, and I'll do my best to be ready with the incense till the temple would be here. But I told him that I'm not going to build him a temple.
But despite his excitement over his team of plants, Ehrlich has also had some big challenges. His plantation is in biblical Judea, known to the world as the West Bank, and that has scared off an American company who partnered with Ehrlich for years. One reason? Backlash from BDS, the anti-Israel boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement.
I'm sorry for this company that they surrendered for this wicked movement, but what can I do about it? I can only fight it by succeeding without them.
He's had to dismiss his Israeli and Palestinian workers and rely on volunteers like Kinneret and her friends, who spent a week here, among other things, pulling weeds.
If this is what we can do to help, this is what we can do to make the world better at the end, so this is our job.
The setback isn't stopping Ehrlich. His goal is to start a research and development center for medical plants that he hopes will benefit the area and the region, and, as the Bible says, make the desert bloom. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Balm of Gilead Farm at the Dead Sea.
Up next, see how the miracle of Aliyah continues from the high seas to the streets of Jerusalem. Every summer, thousands of Jews from around the world come to resettle in Israel. It's a tough transition, especially from Western nations. So why do they do it? Here's a story about one new immigrant family from America and several other newcomers from the U.S. and Canada. It's called Aliyah, Hebrew for going up, or immigrating to Israel. That's what Neil Bryn and his family did just 3 weeks after he completed 20 years in the U.S. Navy.
The highest position I had was the commanding officer of a U.S. warship. I was the commanding officer of the USS Carter Hall, which was an amphibious ship about 200 meters long.
Bryn, his wife Shoshana, and 4 young children now live in this religious neighborhood of Jerusalem. Some might say they gave up a lot to live here, but they say they're home. Bryn spent his summer accompanying his 4-year-old twins to school on the public bus because they don't have a car. Well, sort of.
We do have a car. It's got 4 wheels, all right? It's got 1 seat. Only one person can sit in it, and that's Yudi, who's 5 months old. The propulsion system is human legs attached to arms. It's a stroller. That's our car. It holds everything we need if we need to go shopping, and we can take it everywhere, even up the steps.
About 8 years ago, Bryn's life took on major changes. He became more religious, met Shoshana, and married. They knew they would come to Israel at some point, just not when.
We didn't know if I'd stay in the name for 20 years or for 30 years. If I stayed in 30 years, I'd make 2.4 more times retirement pay every month. It's a tremendous difference. But the trade-off is, this is where we want to live. This is our home. This is where we feel Evergy needs to be. And our children will learn the language so much better at the ages of between 5 months, 3.5, and our twins who were 4, than if it was 10 years later.
They've faced other adjustments as well.
I'm a little bit astounded about how litter appears to be accepted, commonplace, and even not just tolerated, but applauded, it appears to me. So I've organized a weekly cleaning project, and we do that every Friday.
He got the idea from the time he was the executive officer of a ship.
The idea of doing it, calling it Our Power, is something I got from my old ship when I was captain of the USS Carter Hall. And I'm hoping this will be a habit that stays and can really clean the space up. We go from just picking litter to maybe actually cleaning. I mean, these stone stairs could look like clean stone as opposed to, stone with weeds here and dirt here. Now I'd have to say, bypass the dirt, let's pick up the spoon instead. But eventually we can really have a neighborhood that shines.
So why would they give up life in America?
I can't tell you why some people would move, but I can tell you why a Jew would. Because we have a national anthem called Hatikva, and it says which means the hope, and it says in Hatikva that as long as the heart of the Jew beats, I don't know that I can quote it exactly, but as long as the heart of the Jew beats, this 2,000-year dream is just finally being realized.
The mission of the organization is to facilitate any individual who has this dream, who has this yearning, who wants to move and build their future here in Israel and contribute to Israeli society.
Rabbi Yehoshua Faz and his organization Nefesh B'Nefesh helped make the dream become reality for Bryn and his family.
We have this modern-day miracle of the state of Israel that is just unfathomable. It's fantasy stuff. The 2,000 years of wandering and dreaming, and all of a sudden you can get on a plane and change your status and become a citizen of this country. It's incredible.
223 North American immigrants arrived on a flight weeks after Bryn, including 75 young people who came to join the Israel Defense Forces, the IDF. One of them was Nefesh B'Nefesh's immigrant number 50,000, Rebecca Glanzer from Brooklyn, New York.
There's a feeling of belonging here that you really don't have anywhere else, and I just couldn't see myself spending the rest of my life in any other place, so I'm here. IDF service is part of what makes Israel such a united country and what makes everyone feel like it's really their own, so I didn't feel like I could make Aliyah without participating and contributing in that way.
Different reasons brought these newcomers to Israel.
It's something I've dreamed about doing since I was 7 years old. I think Israel has a right to be a country, and I want to do what I can to make sure that it stays a country as long as possible.
I went to Poland and I saw the concentration camps, I saw the ghettos, and I was like, it became so much more real to me. And like my purpose for coming to the Army, I think, is that I want to help protect the one place that I know, God forbid it ever happens, there's a place that's safe for the Jewish people.
But Tammy and Jean Berman from Washington, D.C., who decided to retire here, summed up the reason for coming home.
It's our destiny. We're Jewish. America's wonderful, fantastic country. I love it. My parents were immigrants to America, but we're visitors there. We belong here.
Coming up, it's been more than a decade since the blockbuster, The Passion of the Christ. Now see what Mel Gibson has in mind for the sequel. Superstar actor Mel Gibson is talking about a sequel to his 2004 blockbuster, The Passion of the Christ. Gibson spoke with evangelist and pastor Greg Laurie at Laurie's annual Harvest Crusade at Angel Stadium in Anaheim, California. Gibson told Laurie that the movie focuses on what happened after the crucifixion of Jesus as shown in The Passion. He said it would be a major project.
Of course, that's a huge undertaking. Yes. And, you know, it's not The Passion, too. I mean, it's called The Resurrection.
That's right.
And that's right. Of course, that's a very big subject.
Yes.
It needs to be looked at because we don't want to just do a simple rendering of it. I mean, we can all read what happened, but in order to really experience and explore probably deeper meanings of what it's about, it's going to take some doing. And Randall Wallace is up to the task.
Randall Wallace is the award-winning filmmaker who wrote Braveheart. Well, that's it for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.